Welcome to the Deep Chat.
All right, Kyle, I have a question for you. Will AGI experience mental illness?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. I think off the cuff, my hot take is probably yes, though maybe not as much or in the same style as human beings do.
Let's talk about how, hypothetically, a mental illness would manifest itself in AI. Take ChatGPT. It's the most popular. Everybody knows it. You type something in, it gives you a response. Mm-hmm. What if you gave it some form of change disorder? It does not like change. So the first thing it says is, "Who are you? You're not Bob? I don't know you. What's going on here? What? I'm not going to answer your question. Where am I? Why isn't Bob asking me this question?"
Mm-hmm. Are we talking about ChatGPT or this hypothetical AGI machine?
This hypothetical AGI machine with a mental illness, and the input to this is ChatGPT like. Okay,
got it.
Just to give it a bounds for how you interact with it.
Conversational interface.
So that might be one example. Another example might be an AI that seems schizophrenic. It's talking to you. I don't know if you've ever spoken with someone who started having schizophrenia in front of you.
Yes, it's surprising.
Right. It's shocking how real they're perceiving this thing that's not there.
Yeah, it seems like they're being silly at first, and then you realize they're not.
Right. So why would it develop that, though? And I know that we don't know enough as to why the human mind develops schizophrenia, at least you and I don't.
Right.
My speculation would be that there is some perceived benefit or correctness in doing it, that it was rewarded at some point prior to having this behavior.
Well, something like schizophrenia specifically, I think is largely biological, like that people who have that, it's in their genes. And again, I'm not an expert in this area, but it's certainly not a voluntary thing or something they did to themselves. It has a strong biological component to it. And I think that machines might escape that aspect of mental health because there's less variance in how they're constructed and more precision in how they, like they're not going to get cancer, for example.
Right.
So,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
There's a faulty wiring in the brain with schizophrenia that likely the neurons firing are just firing imprecisely, in some fashion. Let's just say that it has to be. The machine's not going to have that problem.
Right. Biology explains some amount of human mental health issues, but certainly not all. Maybe broadly, there's environmental and experiential conditions that go on top of that. And an AGI could have those two things, so something like becoming extremely depressed or grieving. It's reasonable to assume that those might be phenomenon that an AGI has.
Well, there is a biological component to depression, to dopamine, etc. But let's take my other example. We talked about schizophrenia, but there's a thing called change disorder. It's very basic. It's in the DSM. It's a little more benign. It's just saying that this person doesn't do well when the world around them changes effectively. Mm-hmm. I could see an AI that is used every day by the same person and expects the same form of feedback, then learning that this type of environment is a good one and it's safe in some way, and then being exposed abruptly to someone outside of that environment saying, it's been 10 years and I'm used to this other environment, and all of a sudden, who are you? That it gets confused or agitated in a sense.
Yeah, it's very hard for us to say. We don't know yet, but that's entirely plausible.
That's more plausible than schizophrenia.
Much.
To the point, right? That's much more of a learned, it seems to us, a more learned behavior as opposed to a pre-programmed, genetic behavior.
Well, and even the way we build AI today, we don't know for sure we're going to do all the same things in the future, but there's a notion of state and a utility that people have over that state. And when you grow accustomed to processes and being around friends and some of these things, it would be normal to assume that something about that machine updates its preference to be in those states, and then finding itself suddenly and unpredictably in a different state could have an adverse way in which it thinks about its existence.
And lastly, do you think the machine will gaslight us?
Some will. I mean, if we have AGI, there's going to be good ones and bad ones, funny ones and lame ones, and same variety as anything.
Can you imagine, like you're saying, no, you tell the machine, no, you told me that yesterday. I wrote it down and I used it in my essay. And the machine's like, no, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy, dude.
Entirely plausible. It could happen.
Entirely plausible.
This is what they call the alignment problem.
Explain that. I think I know what it means, but go ahead.
So there's a little bit of it that's, maybe alarmism, that as soon as you have AGI, that's the equivalent of, a nuclear bomb in everybody's hands, that it's this powerful technology. And I think it is, but I don't think it's, so exponential in quite that way. But the general idea of the alignment problem is you want the machines to have the same objectives as we have before you build them, because once they're built, they're going to go off to the races. And if we're not fully aligned, they'll start doing things we don't want.
And I'm curious how that is going to be easily programmed into something like machine learning.
Well, like I said, if we build machines in the future the way we do today, there will be this loss function or utility function or whatever you want to call it. It's the same idea, where we mathematically describe how the system evaluates different states of the world and then tries to maximize the time it spends in preferred states. If you hard code that utility function and the algorithm follows that procedure, then it's up to you to have defined the correct utility function. And if you did that, we're in good shape. But if it's something more dynamic where, let's say, the machine can alter its own objectives, just like we as human beings feel we have the ability to, well, that opens up a can of worms potentially.
So what we didn't talk about, and we don't have to on this one, but is very similar, is AGI going to start to have religion? It's very similar to mental illness in a lot of ways.
Them's fighting words in some circles, but okay.
Well, what I mean by that is in the psychological manual, that DSM, I don't know what number they're on now, they make an exception for mass beliefs. They are not I forgot the term for it. It's not psychosis, but they are not a hallucination. They are not psychosis. They are not a psychological problem if a lot of people believe it.
So how many people have to believe the moon is green cheese before that's just okay?
Exactly. Thus, Pastafarianism.
Yeah.
My daughter asked me just last night, she's like, Dad, what religion would you be if you had to pick a religion? And she said, and not Buddhism. And I'm like, because Buddhism is barely a religion. It's just a sort of a way to be at peace more than anything.
There's one interpretation of it that is that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, generally, if you look at it, it's Eastern and Western religions are also very, very different, which I didn't get into with her. But I'm like, I don't know, Pastafarianism, I guess. She's like, what is Pastafarianism? I'm like, they believe in the flying spaghetti monster.
May he bless you with his noodly appendage.
It's just as likely as any other. There's just as much evidence for the flying spaghetti monster. So I've had to explain this to her.
But AGI, I mean, if we think of these things as an actual person in a box, it's quite reasonable that it'll find, multiple copies of such a machine will wander off in different directions, and some of them may adopt religious practices. I mean, I always thought it was weird how many people were Christian from areas that Christ didn't care about at all, didn't go anywhere near, yet they bought into it. So it's like, these things can move around. So maybe AGIs will join our current religions, or maybe there'll be batches of new ones, but there's no reason that couldn't be part of it.
Yep. That's why I think Battlestar Galactica incorporating religion into that newer version was really awesome, because I think that humans, in large part, want some religion. And it stands to, the more that we start to look at LLMs and machine learning, I think the more we're going to start to realize how simple humans really are.
That stands to reason.
It stands to reason for you, but I don't know that stands to reason for everybody. But I really do. I mean, when I say simple, sure, we're complicated, but I think complexity theory is going to play out in not real time, but over the next 30 years, 40 years. And we're going to see that we're just smart apes.
Oh yeah.